we're going to look at. Throughout this class, I'm going to cover a little bit about, just briefly, about how you build your CMA using the website, untitled.com. We'll tuck into that. We'll look at the summary of the article, 11.1. And then we'll review the purpose of the CMA, who needs one, and of course the advantages for buyers and sellers. We'll look at the fundamental principles and comparables, and we'll also look at characteristics of comparables and number of comparables needed and different types of houses. So that's what we're going to try and cover over the next couple of hours. Certainly glad to have you all on board. As many of you know, I don't watch or read the chat, but if you put chat in there, Leslie Ann will respond. But please just unmute and chip in with anything you have that might be useful for us to hear. Always like stories. Stories are a good way of helping us to remember principles when we're teaching some of these classes. So first of all, let's look at what is a CMA. Well, it's a comparative market analysis. That's what the CMA stands for. It's a tool used to obtain the estimated market value of a subject property by comparing that subject property to other comparable or similarly situated properties in location and property characteristics. And of course, every CMA is different. You never get two the same. But remember, the most important word in that paragraph is estimated. It's not accurate, it's an estimation. And we're working with variables that are different with every property we're trying to build a market analysis on. So that's what a CMA is. Any questions on that, by the way? It's pretty obvious. If you've got any questions or comments, just chip in. Let's just look at how to build a CMA. Have we got anybody new on this class? I don't think so. You all look like you're fairly seasoned, but we'll just quickly review this. I put it in here so that we got new agents or agents that don't do too much. They can just be reminded of where they go to build a CMA. Of course, they go to the www.utahrealestate.com site, and on there you'll notice right at the top menu you've got the fourth little menu there that's entitled CMA. That's where we're going to go to build our CMA. So let's just have a little look at that. You'll see a drop down menu that will say create new. So you're going to open that create new CMA tab, and then you're going to search from the MLS residential search pages for properties similar to your subject. Okay, that's what you're going to do there. We toodle on, you're going to see a form looking at something like this, and you'll have lots of options there, lots of fields where you can choose different measures that you're going to work with on this CMA. So that's where you're going to go. Just to have a little look at that form, you've got the top there, you've got your matches. So you'll first of all put in some credentials in those fields, and it will give you so many. So say for instance your matches is like 320. Well, you don't want that many, so you're going to have to tidy it up, reduce it so you've got a few. Half a dozen is probably a good number to work with. You also see a little map there you can work with, and you can do a map search on geography. You'll obviously see that little criteria section there that will show you whether you're looking at, just sold or sold and active and where it is, etc. You'll also see on the other side of, or below that page, you'll see your listings, your price, your date and site, which are all pretty important areas to build on. And then you'll go to, when you see these properties pop up, you'll want to choose the ones you want and then select the agent full report in that little drop down there. And basically you'll be able to use those for your comparative analysis. So just remember, the closest properties that you can find, like the subject property, the fewer adjustments you'll need to make. So the real deal here is when you're trying to find a comparative report for working out an estimated price on your subject properties, to find properties that are the most similar. And if you can do that, it'll be less adjustments needed, okay? Obviously deselect any listings you don't want to include, which you'll do on that left-hand checkbox column. And then you'll see after you've chosen your comparables, you'll put them into the CM report, and that will calculate like an average price for the subject property based on the range that you've chosen on those other comparable properties. You'll also make some price adjustments that you'll do it at this stage, and they can be created one of two ways. You can either select a set of custom adjustment factors for repeated use if you want to do a number of different CMAs, which you can do at the top of that page, or you can just add one adjustment factor at the bottom of the CMA report, and that will be saved to your account. And you will see that Save CMA at the top there, which you'll click on, and then you will be able to save that report. Now, a couple of things to think about here. You'll notice, well, I'm going to load this in. When you create your CMA presentation to share with your client by selecting that CMA report at the top of the package, but also if you notice very low at the bottom there, you'll see Cloud CMA. Okay, it's another option you have. It is a paid for account. You do get 14 days free service, but then it costs you like $35 a month. But it does allow you to kind of present this CMA in a custom build that you can design. You can make it more attractive, basically. If you do click on that Cloud CMA, you'll see something arrive like this. It will look a little bit like this. And then you'll click on that Create CMA report at the top there. And then that will take you into a screen where you'll be given the opportunity to buy that service. But they will give you 14 days free. But then just to remind you, if you don't cancel before the 14 days are up, they will charge you the $35 a month. I know that quite a few agents have used this and been quite pleased with it. But of course, if you're not doing a lot of listings, then that may be a heavy price to pay if you're only doing a few listings a year. Anybody got any, or is there anybody here that actually used the Cloud CMA? Anybody use the Cloud CMA at all? No? Okay. Well, you do get 14 days free, but if you are going to try that out, just bear in mind, put on your calendar to cancel it before the end of the 14 days, or it automatically charge your account.
So, Stephen?
Yes, Romy, yeah.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, Romy.
Okay. So I was unaware that Cloud CMA has a charge attached to it, because I have used it for the past couple of years, and I've also taken the MLS CMA training as well, and it is a part of, I think, 4 outsourced, technology partners. Like Remind is one of them, ListTrack is one of them, Cloud CMA. I was not aware that there's a charge for it at all.
So it may be the brokerage you're with has already built that into your package. Okay, and that's very good. So yeah, there are some brokerages that are built in a package where the agents get this automatically. But if you're like a single one-man Joe, you're probably gonna have to pay for it. So I just mentioned that because some people have been charged, not thinking they're going to be charged. But yes, there are some platforms that different brokerages have built into the Utah Real Estate option here, where they just have that service for their clients. And that's obviously what you have, Romy. So you've used the Cloud CMA. Obviously, you're happy with it. I know it gives you lots of new options that allows you to present better. Ultimately, that's what you've got, yeah?
It's actually, it is actually an absolutely beautiful tool for presenting the CMA that you build in the, base MLS. As you transition some of those, all of the properties via comparable properties into the Cloud CMA, it really gives you a whole, new level of a presentation that's just really beautiful. I mean, professional, it is clean, it is slick, really cool.
Yeah, I think eventually it will just become free to everybody. That's what I think they'll do. At the moment, if you're not using the cloud CMA, you're going to get some sort of report that looks similar to this, which you're all kind of probably familiar with, but don't use the cloud CMA. Okay, so that's a very, very brief overview of how you work on the website to build your CMA. There are lots of good tools there, and it tends to be very favorably received by those that we share it with. So on that note, let's pull up our first keyword, which will obviously be comparables, I believe, on this one. Or no, comparative. Okay, comparative. That will be the first keyword. Comparative, C-O-M-P-A-R-A-T-I-V-E, comparative. So just get your piece of paper out and jot that down, or pop it in on your electronic device. You'd be surprised how many people tell us that they don't see these keywords. I can never understand that. But anyway, that's the first keyword, comparative. Comparative is the first keyword. Hopefully you've got that. Now let's tuck into this article. It's the National Association of Realtors article, Code of Ethics 11.1. Okay, this is what we've got. The services which realtors provide to their clients and customers shall conform to the standards of practice and competence which are reasonably expected in the specific real estate disciplines in which they engage, specifically residential real estate brokerage, real property management, commercial industrial real estate brokerage, land brokerage, real estate appraisal, real estate counseling, real estate syndication, real estate auction, and international real estate. So that's the first part of this article. So let's see what that's actually telling us. It's basically telling us, as a realtor, realtors provide competence that is reasonably expected in specific disciplines that they engage in. And what are they? They're residential, management, commercial, industrial, appraisal, syndication, auction, and international. Okay, that's that first part of the article. That's what it's saying. Are we all good with that? Or anybody got any questions on that? Okay, so remember, it's competency that's reasonably expected in these specific disciplines that we engage in. All right, now let's read on. Realtors shall not undertake to provide specialized professional services concerning a type of property or service that is outside their field of competence, unless they engage the assistance of one who is competent on such types of property or service, or unless the facts are fully disclosed to the client. Any persons engaged to provide such assistance shall be so identified to the client, and their contribution to the assignment should be set forth. So let's have a look at that and see what that's actually telling us. Quite clearly, we're not the builders, guys. We're not got those benefits. We do not provide specialized services outside our field of competence. We can be assisted, however, by someone who is competent, but of course that needs to be fully disclosed. Are we all good with that? Pretty clear. Okay. Let's look at the standard of practice. So when realtors prepare opinions of real property value or price, they must, and here we have them. Number one, be knowledgeable about the type of property being valued. Okay. Number two, have access to the information and resources necessary to formulate an accurate opinion, and be familiar with the area where the subject property is located, unless lack of any of these is disclosed to the property requesting the opinion in advance. Just think about that. Okay, so let's have a look at that and see what that's telling us. We're a bit like a walking encyclopedia in our own area of expertise. So when you get into the library there, we know all the information about the stuff we know. We don't know any information about the stuff we're not supposed to know. We pass that on to the professionals. So we need to be knowledgeable in our area of expertise. We need to be able to have access to all of the resources in the areas that we are knowledgeable about in our expertise, and obviously be familiar with that particular property. We good with that? Okay. So let's move on. When an opinion of value or price is prepared other than in pursuit of a listing or to assist a potential purchaser in formulating a purchase offer, the opinion shall include the following unless the party requesting the opinion requires a specific type of report or different data set. Let's review these. So number one, identification of the subject property. Number two, date prepared. And number three, defined value or price. Okay, any questions on that, or are we all keeping up with me here? Obviously, any limiting conditions, which may include statements of purpose and or intended use or uses. So let's have a look at that. We'll carry on first. We'll move on to reviewing this bit. Any present or complicated interest, contemplated interest, including the possibility of representing the seller or landlord or buyers or tenants, basis for the opinion, including applicable market data. If the opinion is not an appraisal, a statement to that effect, disclosure of whether and when a physical inspection of the property's exterior was conducted, a disclosure of whether and when a physical inspection of the property's interior was conducted, and finally disclosure of whether the realtor has any conflicts of interest. Just on that last one, does anybody would anybody like to comment and tell me what they understand that number 10 to mean? Disclosure of whether the realtor has any conflicts of interest. How do you think that might apply? Anybody got any ideas on that? If it's just in your head, just say it, because then we can discuss it. Rami, fire away.
Well, whether or not you're involved in the purchase of the property, in the background somewhere, whether you're thinking about self-dealing in some way, related to the property.
Yeah, and that would also include, if you've got if you've got like a third party that was going to be involved in doing some sort of work on this property or evaluation of the property, who's like giving you like a backhander, or a friend or a family member, that you were going to get some sort of return on that, would be also a conflict of interest. So anything, because Rami just said, that ties you to this transaction outside of your own zone as a realtor. So just be aware of that one. Instead, that whole piece that we've just read was amended in 2014. Hasn't been amended since. So the conclusion of this piece is the article and the standards make clear the realtors must be competent in preparing opinions of price. Competency is gained through experience and affiliation with another realtor who has experience and knowledge. That's generally where we get our support and help from, often be our broker or other fellow realtors that we're working with. No one comes into the business competent. We are all learning. We all find ourselves involved in new waters, doing things in real estate we would not have done before. And often when we're dealing with a CMA, it's a new project. We will not have done something the same previously. They're all different. However, agents must recognize when the level of competence required is beyond their abilities and act accordingly. Again, these requirements are for incumbent on realtor appraisers as well as realtor brokers. So, if we don't know the answer, or we move into an area that's a little bit deep water for us, we are encouraged to go for help within our industry. Obviously, we work with our mentors, or we work with our broker, or whoever it is within our team that is someone that we can lean upon. So let's have a look at that. Pay attention and learn from each other, experienced readers. And, you know, we've all got experience, whether we've been in the business, you know, a year or 30 years. We all have a different measure of experience because we're dealing with different clients all the time. And so we can learn from each other, and don't ever be afraid to ask the questions. Anybody got any stories or thoughts where they may have found, maybe early on in their business, where they came across an area of deep water, they need some help, and they were able to get that help from someone within this industry? Anybody got any stories to share? Mike, is that you unmuting?
I was just going to say, I think it's important to not try and fake it to make it, or try and be competent in an area that, you know, you're not competent in. Like, I don't do commercial, and I don't plan on doing commercial, but I'd be happy to refer, you know, a client or a friend to someone who does. And so I think it, for your client's best interest, but also, you know, to save face for yourself, you know, and putting yourself in the client's shoes. Like, who would you want to be working with? Someone that may or may not know what they're doing, or an expert, you know? And so I think we owe it to our clients to put them in the hands of very competent people that are experts in a particular area of real estate.
Yeah, that's a great comment, Mike. Thanks for sharing that. We get more respect if we say, hey, I actually don't know the answer to that question, so let me come back to you. Or we may say, hey, I'm just not too sure about this, so let me just go and get a second opinion, you know, from my real estate associate or broker or whoever it may be that we're working with. People like that because they know that you are looking after them. And whether they're selling a house or whether they're buying a house, this is a big purchase, probably the biggest purchase that most of us ever make. And so it's important that they feel comfortable working with a real estate agent that is going to get the very best performance for them, and going to take things very serious. So Mike's dead right. Don't fake it to make it. Make sure that you are treating them the way you would like to be treated. And if we haven't got the experience, we can get it. And that's the beauty of this industry. We all are part of brokerages where they have lots of experience, lots of agents that have served for many years, and usually we can find quite quickly an answer to any of those questions that might arise. Anybody else got any comments or thoughts on that slide? Okay. Oh, we're up for our next keyword, which is coming early today. So let's have a look at what that one is. It's obviously going to be competence. Competency. Here we go. There it is. C-O-M-P-E-T-E-N-C-Y. Competency. That's important for us to be competent as realtors, and make sure that we give true and accurate information in the areas that we are licensed to operate. That's your number 2 keyword. Competency. Okay, so let's look at this. CMAs and appraisals. Definitely not the same. So let's have a look and see if we can understand what the real difference is here, because many of the clients that we're working with have no idea that there is a difference in these two. CMA reflects a licensed real estate broker's analysis of a similar recently sold properties, and in some cases where applicable can include properties currently under contract or active on the market, to derive an indication of the probable sale price of a particular property. So look at some of the words here. First of all, this is we're using similar properties. We can't get usually a property that's exactly the same. It's going to be similar properties. And we're going to be producing a probable price. It's not going to be, this is the price of your house. We're kind of giving them a direction, and we can be up or down in that direction. And that CMA will change most likely, and can change sometimes from week to week, certainly from month to month, depending on how the market is running. Okay, it's not an appraisal, and we should make sure that our client understands that this is not an appraisal, and we should never refer to it as well. Simply a comparative market analysis report which can vary in its results, even from one realtor to another. So, you know, the 6 of us on this class, we could all take a property and we could all do a market analysis. Now, most likely we're all going to be in the same direction, but there's a high possibility that we would come up with a different bottom line. And so, irrespective of how long we've been in the business, it has the human factor in it. So we can't be exactly 100% sure of the value of the property that we're coming up with, because we're not an appraiser. Any questions or comments on that slide or thoughts? Okay, so let's look at this then. The CMA, quite simply, relies on general market trends compiled by a realtor using sold and active properties available from the MLS. That's the tool we're using. We go to the MLS, we're looking for properties that are being sold, hopefully within a timely period, and we are maybe looking at properties that are currently active, even though there's no guarantee that those properties are going to be sold for the price that they are being advertised at. Very different to an appraisal. Appraisal is created by a certified professional appraiser, obviously, who is licensed to value properties for money lending organizations that obviously need them to do that so that they can qualify loans. So the appraiser has the license to be able to give a value on properties for lending organizations, so that lending organization feel confident that they can loan the money to the buyer. Okay, any questions or comments on that slide? Okay, so just to make sure when we're working with a client, they understand that we are doing a CMA. We are not doing an appraisal. It's very, very different, even though most likely and hopefully we're all in the same direction. So let's look at the standard practice of 11.1. It says he'd be knowledgeable about the type of property being valued. That's part of our responsibility. We can have a clear understanding of what the property is, where the property is, and how the property is presented. We need to know as much of that property as possible. We need to have the knowledge so that we can best compare other properties to it. Many agents have experience in pricing residential property, but not complex commercial or special purpose property. For example, consider an agent whose business is entirely focused on high-rise condominium units. This agent will be at a distinct disadvantage in attempting to form a price opinion on a single-family home. Agents should ask themselves, do I understand this segment of the market and how it behaves? So think about the sort of work we're doing, the little area that we're specializing in, and we have a client that comes along and they're asking us to do a comparable price structure for a property that's maybe outside of our range of expertise. That's when we need to lean on to someone else to help us, because we may be at a disadvantage because we don't deal with those properties all the time. Have access to the information and resources necessary to formulate an accurate opinion. So the agent must be able to consult relevant resources in forming an opinion about property price, such as the MLS and obviously the public records. Agents should ask themselves, what type of data and information are required to price this property, and do I have access to that data and information? Any questions on that slide? The next part goes on, be familiar with the area where the subject property is located. So clearly here, this requirement speaks to the need of geographical competence, the agent's knowledge of the marketplace in which the property is located. Each geographical market has its own quirks and nuances, and agents can easily find themselves out of their area of competence. I know when Leslie and I lived in Harriman in Utah, we were in a unique area where we had large houses, large single family homes, properties on small lots. And the area in sort of Rosecrest area there were very popular because they would have these small lots and big houses on there that obviously have a some facilities like a clubhouse or tennis court or basketball court or swimming pool that would allow the owners to participate in, because obviously they have the room on their own property. But it was a small, narrow kind of market. People wanted those houses that didn't want a lot of yard work. They wanted they were working, and they wanted a small yacht, a small lot with a big house on it, and that was unusual. But we knew the area, and we were able to sell at that platform. So just be aware that you need to know the area in which you're located in. Agents should ask themselves, do I have geographical competency in this area? If a realtor lacks any of the preceding aspects of competence, he or she must disclose this in advance to the buyer or seller who is representing the price opinion. Requesting the price of opinion. The buyer or seller can then make an informed decision about whether to have the realtor proceed with the opinion. So it's important that we disclose that if we don't have the necessary competence in the geography of the area, so that our client understands what they're dealing with. Even better to get some help from another realtor there, maybe run some comps for us or help us with the CMAs. Any questions on that slide? Okay. So it carries on. Note that Article 11 states that realtors can engage the assistance of one who is competent. That's when they undertake to provide services outside of their own field of competence. In this situation, the realtor must also identify the person or persons so engaged and their specific contribution to the client. So if we do need to have some extra help, we need to disclose that to the client. Any questions on that one? Okay, let's go to the purpose of the CMA is to establish an accurate range of value for a property that is a seller wishes to sell or a buyer wishes to buy. So obviously we can use a CMA whether we are representing a buyer or a seller. If we're representing the seller, we're obviously trying to find out the type of price that we want to list the property at. If we're representing a buyer, we're probably checking that the price is about right for that home. An accurate range is one that reflects market conditions at the time and place of the transaction. After an accurate property value range has been determined, the CMA is used to help sellers identify an asking price and buyers identify an offer price. Hopefully they both come together. In other words, a CMA provides an objective, market-driven starting point for price properties. Any questions on that slide or comments? Okay, so let's talk about who needs a CMA. Obviously, sellers, buyers, and real estate professionals all need the CMAs. Let's take a closer look at each group's motivation for using CMAs and the benefits that they can derive from them. So we'll start off with the seller. We want our seller to look happy like this guy. But I'm sure every agent here has had a client or a seller that's overestimated the value of their home. So let's pause there for a moment and see if we can just share some stories where we've had maybe a client who has completely overestimated the value of the home, and then why they thought their home was worth more than we consider the value to be. Anybody got any thoughts or comments or stories I'd like to share on that? Life stories are great. So Leslie Ann, we had a story that came to us from someone. Was it valued over $100,000 more than what the list? Can you remember that story? Can you share that one with us?
No, it was just a post on Facebook on.
Oh, it's a post. Okay. Yeah, share that.
I think sold for 50,000 over. No, it was earnest money. $50,000 went hard on acceptance, and then someone said, I can beat that 100,000.
Oh, that's what that one was. Okay.
But we did have that client in Harriman on our street that we had there for 6 months, the Richards.
Yes.
It was a great house, but it backed to main road, and they were insistent it was worth it, and we kept telling them it wasn't. And I think sometimes all humans, we all can be prideful, and they ended up, because it didn't sell, taking it off the market for a couple of months and then listing it with another agent. And it kind of does really make you feel like they're blaming you that it didn't sell, and you remind them that we regularly told them that it was overpriced. But they just, and it ended up selling for, I think we did have an offer and they rejected it.
Yeah,
and
I think they wanted, wasn't it, they wanted something like 485 or something, and we said, you know, it's really around the 465.
Yeah.
And then we eventually got an offer in for the 465, and they rejected it. And then they
later sold it for less.
They sold it for 450 something. And so they lost money, and they lost time and money actually, because they didn't follow, you know, the CMA report that we had shared with them. They, in their minds, they thought it was worth more because they'd spent more money on it. Sometimes people spend money on a home and they want to get that money back, but that really has little to do with the market value. That's their value. Anybody else got any stories they'd like to share where they've found a seller that's just overestimated the value of their home, and how they did that?
So about roughly 2 years ago, when I first got into residential, I was working with a broker that gave me the privilege of assisting a client of his that had a $3 million home on the market, 3.1 million, in the country club estates area there in Sugar House. Beautiful home. I mean, incredible. So the owner, she was an engineer. So she and her husband, owned this lovely home and about 11,500 square feet. I mean, it took about 20 minutes just to turn the lights on in this house. I mean, it took 20 minutes to walk through, from the basement all the way. I mean, it was crazy. So she remodeled it. We did the kitchen. I mean, we did a lot of, really almost rebuilt a lot of the home's sections from what they initially were. She priced it at about 3.1 million. It ended up selling, well, of course, after a year of having that listing, we couldn't find the buyer. Right. So the husband relisted it with a Sotheby's, and they sold it about a year and a half, maybe two later, for 2.5 million, $500,000 plus less than what they had initially priced it at.
Yeah. Did you, Romney, do you know why they thought it was that value? Was it because they bought high, or was it because they put a lot of extras in? What was their motivation to think it was that much more than what it was sold at?
Sure. The wife, as the lead contractor, she's She's a real, magnificent engineer and builder. She really put about a year's worth of renovations. I mean, she took out walls, put in, incredible. I mean, just the woodwork alone was a very specialized. The wood floors were just incredible, incredible. And she really did, of course, all the decks. And so it was her investment in that home. I'm not sure how much it really was, but it was a price thing given her, her financial and commitment to completely redoing this, this property. And they've, so they may have bought it 2 to 3 years prior for, I think, maybe a little bit over $1 million, maybe 1.5, but they wanted 3 for it. And there was nothing in the neighborhood, nothing that we could find that justified the 3 million price point, nothing.
Yeah, and the other thing, of course, is you've got less people that have got $3 million sitting around in their pocket to buy a house. You've got less people, less fishes in the sea that are interested in swimming over to that neck of the woods. Yeah, and that's a usual challenge that some sellers have. Is sometimes sellers think, I'll do this home up with the very best of everything, then I get my money back. But what they don't realize is they should do the home up for themselves if it's going to be the very best and everything, and live in it, because that's how they get their benefits from it. If they're going to do the home up to sell, sometimes the sellers are not, sometimes the buyers are not interested in the very special, expensive type of wood that doesn't look any different maybe to a usual piece of wood, in cabinets or whatever. They don't attach the value there. So we probably all come across our sellers that have overestimated the value of the home. Here's the question.
Can I just say something?
Yes, yeah.
So on Presidio's social media, a Facebook page, someone shared an image. I'm happy to send it to any of you because it's kind of funny. It's got like a game show guy with his thumb up with audience behind him. And it says, "Welcome to real estate in 2021, where the price is made up and the comps don't matter." And then we kind of like joked and we said, slightly over exaggerated, but not really. And we are certainly in a crazy market. As I said, people are doing the craziest things, like putting 50,000 or 100,000 to go hard on acceptance. And yeah, it's insane. Yeah, I just thought I'd share that lighthearted thought.
Thank you, Leslie. Yeah, we are in a strange market at the moment, and when we go through these courses, we're really talking about just a general platform, because obviously the market changes and it can swing the other way at any year. So here's a question I'd like to pose out there, see if someone could help us with an answer, or maybe they've worked with a client. If we've got a client who has considered their home to be valued much higher than the CMA that we presented to them, how do we help them understand that most likely they're not going to get that value for their home? And I am saying that bearing in mind that we are in a seller's market, so sometimes they probably are going to get a little bit more. However, if somebody is needed a loan, a mortgage on that home, then there are going to be some constrictions on how high that price can go. But how do we deal with a seller that is totally committed to having their home listed at a certain price, like the one that Rami said? I mean, it was on the market for a year or so before they even would come down. How do we deal with a client like that? What can we do to help a client that is in that place? I've only got a few people on here, so let's have someone else besides me and Rami chip in. Mike, you're in. I think you just unmuted.
Yeah, well, I think it's helpful to talk about a range with a client. They may have a number set in their head, but talking about what's the price range you'd be comfortable in taking an offer with.
Okay, that's a very good suggestion, Mike. And usually that price range is going to be something like what they have to have out of this home to make it work. So maybe they're moving to another home and they got to have so much equity out of this home in order to be able to buy this other home thereafter. So that may be the bottom limit. And the upper limit, of course, will be what they will be happy to take, bearing in mind I guess a loan company or a company supplying mortgage will be able to value the home at. That's what we're probably looking at, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, any other thoughts? Any other thoughts? You two ladies, you going to chime in here? You going to chime in? Jenny's smiling. Maybe she'll chime in for me. There she goes. Tell me what your thoughts are, Jenny.
I just think it's kind of the same as what's kind of been talked about. Sometimes you just have to kind of walk them through, because it's their investment that they've, maybe spent more money on the type of wood, and you have to kind of explain, well, same thing, all wood isn't gonna, it all looks the same type of a thing. So you kind of have to just say, well, these are your preferences, and this is what you wanted to do to your home. So, sometimes you just have to kind of be gentle on them to know that it was just their choices to spend the money to do that type of thing. Yeah. I don't know.
That's great advice. Yeah, just to remind them that they've chosen those extra features that have been really good for them, but other people may not attach the same value to them. Same sometimes with carpets or floor coverings. Sometimes that you can have a lot of money spent on them, but the overall appearance may look very similar. May be very similar. So let's see what else we've got loaded in on this one. Many factors can contribute to this misconception of value. Sellers might hear and exaggerate his sales amounts from neighbouring homes through local gossip. That can often happen. Someone say, "Oh, I sold my house at this price." And we may start to see that in a year or two. We may see people or neighbours say, "Hey, oh yeah, you could definitely get more than that. We sold our house at this price, but that was it was a seller's market, and maybe in a couple of years' time it might be a buyer's market, and all of a sudden the houses on that street are not bringing in as much value." But the seller doesn't understand that. They're still thinking they're going to get the same amount of money as their neighbour who sold a year or so ago. So that's something to think about. They might apply broad market trends and simplistic assumptions to come up with an unreasonably high value. So they may be thinking, well, they may not be thinking there's any difference between one area and another. They think, houses selling in Daybreak are the same price as houses selling in South Jordan or West Jordan or Harriman or Riverton. They may not know that these are different market value areas. So that's another assumption that they may make, which might not be exactly true. They might believe that they can recoup the cost of every home improvement that they've made over the years, and that's an often mistake that sometimes our sellers will make. Say, I put the basement in, put it in last year so I could sell the house. They don't realise that sometimes the basement may not necessarily increase the value of the house much more than the cost of doing the basement. And I put a note there, perhaps above all, they attach a high value to their home based on their emotions and their pride of ownership. So we want to make our sellers happy. We want to make them like this guy happy to get the money they can get out of their home, but we have got to educate them. And the CMA can help us do that. If we go through the CMA carefully and we say, look, we've looked at these homes. These are the ones that are very similar to yours in this area. And these are the prices they're selling at. And they may say, well, what about this other home down the road? Or say, well, yes, that's very similar to yours, but also very different. It may be the same size on the same lot, and it may have a similar look, but that's a custom made home, whereas yours is a track home. And so I've got to use track homes because that they're more like your home. That is a custom home. Inside it will have a lot of customized builds that your home does not have, even though it's the same size and it looks very similar and it's on probably the same size lot. So we help our sellers understand why we've come up with a CMA price, a comparative value or market value, which is where it is. Education is really important to help our sellers be comfortable, because the worst thing to do, as Leslie Ann highlighted earlier, is we go in at their price, which we know it's not going to sell at, and then it doesn't sell, and they blame us because it hasn't sold. And, you know, we already knew it was going to be 20, 30, 40, 50,000 overpriced. It wasn't going to sell. And another realtor comes in and, you know, they take the glory because we've done the hard work and we didn't get the sale. And see, Romney's nodding his head. He's had that experience, as probably most of us have.
That was painful, Stephen. You know, babysat that home for a year. I mean, you know, I helped them with with their sprinkler system that stopped working, or, you know, the heating unit that just, you know, wasn't quite. I mean, just the work I put in, you know, driving up there just to check on it, you know, weekly and on for a year. It was painful, you know, when we didn't get the sale. I mean, they sold it a year and a half later with somebody else for 2.5 million, and it was painful.
Yeah, and how much did you get paid for all that work you did, Robbie?
Zero.
It's not funny, is it? That's not funny, the zero. You know, we've done the same. We've done the same, and it's not much fun. And so we just have to be real clear up front and say, hey, this is how I'm arriving at this. One thing that Leslie Ann and I have done, where we've had a seller be very stubborn on, this is the price my house is worth. We said, hey, you know, ours is only a CMA, you know, it's a comparable market analysis, and we're using the tools we have, which is the MLS, and we're using houses that are being sold or houses that are active on the market that are as similar as we can find within this geographical area, within a time zone, you know, within a few months or a year or whatever it may be. But why don't we can give you a name of an appraiser who will actually just come and do an appraisal on your home, a proper appraisal. It might cost you, you know, $300 or $400, but that will give you a second opinion from a licensed professional appraiser who will tell you what value he will put it at for the companies that he's working with, for, you know, getting loan value. And we've found that sometimes will help.
They're called restricted appraisals, and they actually now, often they'll do it for under $200. Sometimes I even know one that will do it for $100, because they don't do an in-depth appraisal like they would for an actual purchase. But yeah, it's considerably cheaper than that.
Oh, yeah, it's gone down. Oh, I mean, you know, a couple $100 is a good price to pay to get just another opinion. So that may be an option you can look at if you've got a seller that's really struggling, and they're using then a third party who is licensed as an appraiser, and he will give, or she'll give them a fairly good indication of price. And if that comes in, which hopefully it will do, similar to yours, then often that can help a seller get over that little hurdle. Any other thoughts or comments on that seller's slide?
What did you call it, Leslie Ann? A restricted appraisal?
Yeah, a restricted appraisal, yeah.
Yeah, because it can't actually be used in a purchase, to purchase a mortgage. So it's restricted for the use of helping a seller or an owner understand the price of their home. Although at the moment, you know, they could have an appraisal and in a week's time it could be different. But yeah, a restricted appraisal, because its uses are restricted.
And I understand not all appraisers do them. Is that right, Leslie Ann? You understand it? I think some of them specialize in doing them.
I think any of them can do it. I think some of them don't want to. I guess it depends how busy they are and if they have the time. We had someone recently that was looking at buying, and he thought his house was considerably more than the comps. And I did reach out to two people that I know that do it. And one was, I think, was $150 and one was $100. But one of them said he wouldn't be able to do it for 10 days. He was busy. So, yeah.
So that's an option for those of you that might need to use it. Okay, let's move on to a few more items with the seller. CMA provides the data and reasoning to help sellers see not only the value of their home, but also why that value is accurate as far as we can gather with the information we put in there. Sellers who understand the objective logic for valuing their home are more likely to list their home at an accurate price for its market. As a result, they are also more likely to sell their home quickly and efficiently, which is really good for us. Owners who are able to sell property promptly avoid much of the stress and disruption of repeated showings of their homes. If they're under pressure to move, for example, a job or downsize to a more affordable home, and efficient sales serves them further anxiety. Sometimes sellers undervalue their property, such as when an estate is interested in selling a home quickly to distribute the proceeds. CMA helps protect sellers against undervaluing as well as overvaluing a home. So just some thoughts there that might be helpful. Certainly, if we can get our sellers to understand how we have arrived at those prices, then that can be more helpful to them. And they've got to weigh it up, because usually the price of a home sells with two things on the balance. It's either the price or the time. So you can either keep the price high and you can just wait. Okay, sooner or later, the time will catch up with the price, if you see what I mean. Or if time is at the minimum, you've got to lower the price to meet your time deadline. They're the only real variables you have in the game. Most likely today, whatever house price you're sitting at one day, it will be worth more. Or if you think your house is worth a certain amount one day, over time, it might take a number of years, but sooner or later, time will catch up with the price of the home. But if you've got to sell within a time, then the only thing you do is lower the price. So there we have it. There's sellers. Any questions on or thoughts on the sellers before we move to buyers? Okay, let's try and keep our buyers happy. And at the moment, they're not very happy because there's not much inventory on the market. So buyers are getting frustrated because they're putting a number of offers on homes and people are coming back and rejecting them because they have lots of offers. So buyers are often a great disadvantage in knowing the market value of the home they want to purchase. So first-time home buyers might be especially naive about the many variables that affect the market. If they're moving to a different location, even if it's just a bordering town, they could be unaware of local trends that differ significantly from those of their current neighborhood. That can also be a challenge with buyers. You know, we've got this great house and we want to move it and sell. When we move to this new neighborhood, they don't realize that's a more expensive neighborhood. And of course, the houses there are a little bit more expensive. Any comments or questions on that slide? So look at some other things with buyers. CMA allows buyers to make offers based on objective data relevant to specific market. Buyers are less likely to make a low ball offer in a comparative market, potential losing the home to another buyer. So if they can see a CMA and you say to them, you know, this house is probably worth what the seller is asking, and here's the reason, because I've done a comparative report on these other houses in the same area, and the price is coming out at this price, which is more or less what they're asking for. And then usually if buyers can understand that, they will not make a low ball offer, which can be very frustrating to the agent and the seller. Less likely to make a too high offer that eventually is scuttled because a lender won't offer a mortgage on that price. We're probably getting that at the moment. We're probably getting some houses that have got offers in that are higher than the market value of that price. And so the lenders say, you know, we can't loan you the money because we don't think it's worth that price. Less likely to ever pay for a home, that's freeing up their financial resources for other important life expenses. So let's pause there for a moment and see if we've got any stories where we've worked with a buyer who's either gone for the lowball platform and missing on houses, or maybe a buyer that's offered too much and then got stopped, by the loan company or the company that's they're trying to get their mortgage from. Anybody got any stories on that they'd like to share? There's not many of us on this little class today, but I'm sure we've got someone who's got a story to share. We always learn from stories. Okay, let me see if I can squeeze a story out for you there. Actually, I should ask Leslie Ann so you can squeeze a story out. She's got a better voice than me. You got a story we can share on that one, Leslie Ann, one of ours, where we've had a low ball off?
Sorry, I was sidetracked. I was filling something. What was the question?
Sorry, I was just wondering if we could share one of our stories about having a buyer that would put a low ball offer in.
Oh, we've had several, and I can't think of one particularly. I mean, I probably wouldn't even work with a buyer that wants to do that in this market, because you're just going to waste your time. I think you just got to educate them. And the sad thing is, when you have a client that you're helping sell a home and buy a home, and they want the highest offer for their home, but then they want a lowball on a home they're buying. And yeah, especially when it's someone you kind of think, oh, I wish I didn't know that about you. But I think you just got to educate people. And I think it's okay to say, if you were the seller and you received the offer you're thinking of putting in, what would you think? How would you take it? And sometimes that works, but sometimes with people that think they know it all, it doesn't matter what you say. But I think you need to set the expectations and try and find out what someone's like before you actually work with them, because there are some people you just may never make something work. And I think it's sad when people always think that they have to not offer a full price. Like I said, I'm not talking this market, that even if the house is priced really well and you tell them that, they still don't want to offer full price.
Yeah, and we have had that. I can see a few buyers now in my mind where we've sold their house and we also helped them buy a house. And the negotiations, they don't want to move an inch on the selling their house. They want that top dollar. And when it comes to buying, they just want to cut that price down. I feel it's unreasonable sometimes, but there we have it. So the key thing is to educate our buyers, and the CMA can be a great way in which we can help them understand, that this house is worth the money that the seller is asking for. And in this particular market, most likely, if you are not going to offer a full price offer, you're probably not going to get that house. That's probably how we're going to be in this particular market. But markets change. We had a guy buy a house. He was out of state early this month. He was in Colorado buying a house in Logan. So he didn't know the market at all. He was buying a house really with his daughter, who was in the university up here. And he got his budget. His budget was here, and we could not find anything anywhere close to where his budget was going to be. Over his budget. That's where it was. And we said, hey, this is what we're looking at. And he understood. He was sharp enough to understand that he got to put in a full price offer and not really ask for, any concessions. And luckily he was able to get that house and we were able to move him in there.
Well, the other side to that story is that when he told us his price range was 250 to 300, we're like, oh
no
dear,
chance.
This is going to be hard work. So we reached out to our amazing broker up here and said, hey, Presidio, and I think a lot of brokerages are good at that. We're really good at networking within our own company. And I just reached out and said, look, do you know of anything coming up, you or any of the other agents? And she said, well, actually, we're going to be listing our duplex. They were building a home in a couple of weeks, you're welcome to show him. And so we showed him, and we liked it, fitted his needs, wrote up an offer, no bidding war. And he actually said to me when we were still negotiating a little bit on some things, he said to me, if this hadn't worked out, I would have not have gone forward with looking for a home. He said, I cannot do the bidding war. And so it was a blessing for him and us and our broker, because she actually wasn't looking forward to having to have many offers and accept one. It worked out for us all. So yeah, so he did offer, and she kind of more or less told us what she would be willing to accept. She was the seller and our broker and the realtor. And that she said, you know, we won't accept anything less than full price. And we just said to him, she didn't actually say don't ask for closing costs, but that's what she means when she says a full asking price. And so we just had to negotiate a little bit on the earnest money. And again, we try and educate our clients to offer at least 1%, nothing less, but sometimes they don't want to do that. But yeah, within, I think, a 24-hour period, we were under contract. So that was awesome.
Yeah, and the key thing there was education again, helping our buyer understand the market, helping understand the value of the type of home he was looking for, and to make sure he understood that there was little movement in this market as a buyer to try and reduce that buying cost. So he was happy. He was looking like this lady, happy buyers, happy sellers. That's what we're after. Any other comments or thoughts on working with buyers?
So Stephen, just briefly, I am working with a buyer that, you know, from the outset of the engagement, I made it clear that if a home is, so her budget's about 325-ish, is what she's looking at, is what she, she's been approved for, etc. And I said, look, if you want to get into a home in this market, you might want to consider looking at homes. This is just a consideration, it's your choice. But if you're really serious about getting forward movement here, consider looking at homes in the 300 to 310, range, so you can offer, an extra $10,000 or $15,000 if 325 is your max. Because if we're offering 325 for homes priced at 325, with the bidding wars out there, there's just no chance that I'm seeing in my brokerage whatsoever. I mean, it is $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 over list price.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and it's good to have that conversation early. And sometimes you'll find that the buyer will say, well, actually, I can go a bit more. That's right, isn't it? Sometimes they'll say that. So when you have that conversation with them, sometimes it will give them an opportunity to open up another little door that will say, well, yeah, I could probably go another 10 or 15,000 more, but I really want to.
And also if they're insistent that they want to look up to that price, then maybe it would be appropriate to say, well, are you willing to go higher? Long gone are the days of, the house has been on the market a month, so we could actually give a lower offer. I mean, for start off, houses are not on the market for a month unless there's something majorly wrong or they're way overpriced. But it wasn't that many years ago, or even 2 years ago, where, you'd look at a house, if it'd been on the market for a while, we would say to our clients, then yeah, maybe they would accept a slightly lower offer. But those days are gone. So
yeah, always good to know roughly what we're looking at as far as what the buyer has in the pocket to buy, what they're approved for. If the lender has only approved them for 325, then that's what it is. Unless they've got a stash of cash savings somewhere, that's what it's going to be. And so Rum is exactly right, you know. So let's just look at the 3-3-10 department. So we've got a little bit of extra if we need it. So great advice there. Let's go on to the agents and see why CMA is important for us as agents. Obviously, to serve the best interests of the buyer and the seller, clients, real estate agents obviously need that CMA. A well-researched CMA is a listing agent's greatest tool in pricing a home appropriately. A listing that is properly priced is more likely to sell quickly and efficiently, and we're all happy when that happens because we haven't got to do loads of showings. And in this market, we're probably going to be fairly quick as a buyer's agent, sorry, as a seller's agent. A listing that is overpriced will not be competitive in its market and will more likely languish out offers. Overpriced, unsold listings are ultimately income killers for agents. And Rummy's story of the 3 million home is a classic one there. And he probably spent a good 100 hours with that client, or maybe even more, and
A
he
lot
got no return. A lot more, and he got no return. And you know, he was faithfully working for nothing. Poor old Robbie. We've all done it. I've done it as well, and it's so frustrating. You have to go take the sign down without getting any money for the house that you've spent time on. That's the disappointing thing. You go take the sign down. Oh my goodness. And it's more disappointing when you see someone else's sign go up. And it's even more disappointing when you see the price has gone down, which is usually lower than one that you suggested. And you think, goodness me, why could they not have made this work? So yeah, we won't try and bring that up anymore, Rami. I know you feel. Disaster. Anyway, the other thing, of course, is that they don't generate warm feelings or recommendations from the clients. You tend to lose those people. And we've lost people like that, where we've gone at the price they've said because they're not believed us, just to get the listing, and then it hasn't sold, and we've lost the listing, lost the sale, and lost the client. So try and make these CMAs work for you as clients. Another thing about the agents, complaints about incorrect pricing are among some of the top legal claims made against real estate professionals. So has anybody had any experience of that at all? But that is one of the top areas of complaints that get sent in. When buyers feel that they have overpaid or sellers feel that they have undersold in property transactions, they're more apt to feel resentful, angry, and cheated, and are likely to blame the professionals who guided them, including, unfortunately, we as real estate agents. Are you acting as a disclosure agent in a transaction? Consider that question as well. Requirements are state specific, but if you prepare a CMA for the seller while acting as a disclosed dual agent, you should also do so for the buyer. Not doing so puts the buyer at a disadvantage. So just make sure that if you are working as a dual agent, that you've got to be transparent in this and share both clients the same information. Any thoughts or comments on that screen? Okay, let's toodle on to the next area. So some of the advantages for sellers, I've just highlighted these for you, so you can just jot them down when you're working with a seller. Obviously receives a fact-based objective assessment of the home's value. Sellers don't experience the stress and disruption that can occur when homes languish on the market, so that's a benefit for them. Sellers are protected from undervaluing their home, and of course sellers avoid the delay that occurs when they accept a high offer and then the property doesn't appraise for the offer price. The lender comes back and says, you know, I know you want to have this house at 400,000, but we can only lend you 370, so you're 30 grand short. And the buyer says, oops, I haven't got 30 grand, so now I'm out of the game. We've got to start again. So great advantages for sellers if we can get them to understand and respond favorably to this CMA. Any thoughts or questions or comments on that screen? Let's look at the advantages of the CMA for the buyers. Obviously receives fact-based objective information about the home, which is especially important when they're not familiar with the local market. Often they're not. Buyers are less likely to lose the home they really want because they offer too low. And buyers are less likely to encounter problems obtaining a mortgage because the house appraises below the offer price. And buyers are less likely to overpay for a home, thus preserving financial resources for other important home and life expenses. Any thoughts or comments on that slide? Okay, let's look at the advantages for the agents, which is us. Obviously, listings are not sticking out there for a long time, sapping our time, and our energy and our income. Clients are less likely to feel resentful about and blame the agent for the price they overpaid or received. And clients are more likely to be satisfied and recommend the agent's services to others. So there are three really good benefits or advantages for us as agents. Anything to add to that as agents, or thoughts or comments on that?
I have a story for you, Stephen.
Thank you, Jenny. I love stories. Let's have it. We all love stories.
One of my listings I did get because of my CMA that I did, and the seller just told me that it was because when I prepared my CMA, I went off like what had been sold, and she said that another agent, you know, tried to come in and wanted to list the house, and he had used what was actually active listings. So she said obviously what had been sold was more accurate, so that's why she decided to go with me. So just food for thought, I guess. That's
great. Can I ask, Jenny, can you remember what the difference may have been in those two prices?
I don't know. It was probably 6 or 7 years ago. So it was a while ago, but okay. Probably not a lot. But she herself was an agent. So her house she was selling was one that she'd been renting for a couple of years, and she had moved to Arizona, and she was an agent. So she was aware of, you know, how you prepare a CMA, and she just, you know, disclosed to me that this other agent, you know, he had used what was currently active, and so she kind of knew. So anyway,
yeah, and on that point, I know with appraisers you'll often see on an appraisal maybe 1 or 2 actives, but the predominant number of homes need to be sold. And I kind of, again, it depends on the market. I sometimes will maybe put some actives, 1 or 2 in, but always have a lot more solds. And again, sometimes you can use under contracts, and you can maybe assume if it went under contract in 1 day that it probably went for the list price, you know. But I think that I have often warned potential clients that be wary of agents that may tell you that you'll get more for their house, like in your case, Jenny, because they want the business. It's not a guessing game. We go on comps, and like, again, this market's slightly different. So you might go, okay, maybe a bit more, but we try to be as careful and upfront and honest with our people, and realistic is the word I'm looking for, of what they'll get, rather than tell them a higher number to get them to sign an agreement with us and then them not be able to sell at that price.
Yeah, very good. And one of the benefits of Jenny's story there is that obviously the agent that was just using active listings to qualify that house didn't realize that he was working, maybe didn't realize fully he was working with a realtor that knew the game plan. You know what I mean? She already had knowledge. She kind of knew how this works out. And maybe she was testing people, and she chose Jenny because she, in her mind, considered her, quite rightly so, to be the better agent, because she was working with
I think it's good to, you know, I think you use maybe under contracts and active listings to confirm what the solds are telling you.
Yeah.
As a way of seeing that the market maybe hasn't fallen, that it's kind of even, but then again, at the moment, that doesn't really work. So it really does depend on the market that you're in. And I don't know what your guys' thoughts are, but there's a lot of talk that they don't think the market's going to change anytime soon. But yeah, that's a whole nother story, right?
Well, I think Utah has a lot of inbound people coming in at the moment, so maybe our market's going to keep going. But it will change one day. It will change one day, I'm sure.
I've got a question slash statement briefly, because we've got some very remote areas here. I had the privilege of listing my wife's parents' home, and they live in Morgan. Now, their home in Morgan is the most beautiful home, 3 or 4 bedroom, whatever it was, on, about 1 or 2 acres. I can't remember now. And there were no comps, like no comps.
That is a problem.
I mean, anywhere within 5 mile radius, you'd go out 6 mile radius, you'd go out 6 mile radius, nothing to their home.
So we have an appraiser friend. We haven't spoken to him for a while, but I remember asking him that question, and he said you have to know not just that area, but surrounding areas to know that maybe you could go 10 miles out, but it's a very similar area in terms of prices, etc. And I think it's a bit of a guessing game. And if you don't want to, that is probably when you would engage someone doing an appraisal, or if you have a friend, someone helping you by telling you exactly what you need to do to work on a number to list a house. Yeah, it's difficult.
So
very good.
Yeah. So what I ended up doing was I found comps still within Morgan County, but that were, as you said, Leslie-Ann, I mean, miles and miles away. Interesting that the appraisers, I provided, I gave them my comps.
That's the best thing to do.
This is a point of reference. And I understood that appraisers in Morgan have a lot of difficulties, putting appraisals together because they can't find anything either. So, so he had that as a resource, and the home came in at what I had appraised, but I had to go 8-9 miles radius to find something.
That is a challenge with rural areas, and it's important that they send out an appraiser that knows that area and not an appraiser that doesn't, because they'll have just as hard a time as you will. So and you
benefit there, I was going to say, the benefit there, Rami, is that you shared with him your research, which would have been very helpful to him and would have helped that property coming on price. Good. Let's move along, folks. Let's move along, and let's look at this part here. So general parameters for choosing comparables are determined by, obviously, the subject home, subject's number of bedrooms and bathrooms, size of its living space and lot, the neighborhood, the school district in which they're located, its age, condition. All these characteristics form the parameters for choosing comparables. So let's have a little look at those. Of course, a comparable is never perfectly similar to the subject. We mentioned that earlier, but a central goal in preparing a CMA is identifying comparables that are as similar as possible, physically, functionally, and geographically to the subject. That's what we're kind of working on here. The more similar the comparable, the fewer adjustments you will need to make, and the more accurately you can determine the value of the subject and price it correctly. So we'll chop those down to little areas and see if we can just get a bit more juice on this. So location, okay, we're obviously looking at the same division, and that's the same as subdivision. And if we've got nothing in that subdivision, we may look at another subdivision that is a similar priced subdivision. Obviously, same neighborhood, we're after that. Ideally, we're after half-mile radius up to 1 mile city urban. Same school district if possible, if schools are driving the kind of driving force in the market. Same complex for multi-family homes. And of course, if we're working for rural, usually 5 mile radius is what they work on. But as Rami said, you know, you may have to even go out further than that if it's a very specialized home. So location is very important. We need to understand the location of our property so that we can find something that's going to be reasonably similar to that location. Any comments on that slide before I move on? Okay, so now we'll look at date of sale. This is important. General guidelines is that comparable dates of sales should fall within 90 days. That's 3 months of the CMA research. Obviously, if we can't find anything in that, then we'll go out further. But ideally, we're looking at that 90-day mark. And in today's market, that's probably pretty easy to find. No comparables are available, then you can reach back as far as 180 days, and if none is there, you go back as far as a year. So if you're on a specialized property, sometimes you've got to go back into the previous year. Remember, to be as accurate as possible, 90 days should be used if available. So it's the same as ideally we should be using sold properties, but if you haven't got that many, then we can move to actives. We try and do what the ideal is first before we bring in the exceptions. So date of sale is important. Now we move to the size of the property. Comparables should be the same size, of course, or close to the same size as the subject in terms of both living area and the lot size. That makes a huge difference. A big house on a big lot is definitely going to be a different price than a big house on a small lot. So make sure we get both those sizes locked in there. MLS CMA is set up to put in comps from 500 square feet smaller and 500 square feet larger. So that's a good thing. When doing a CMA, you should first try to bracket the subject property with one comp being a little smaller, one comp being a little larger, and one being as close to the subject property size as possible. So you try and work on the 3 really, one more or less the same, one a little bit smaller, one a bit larger, so you can start to get those comparables working. Any questions or comments on size? Okay, so let's move to the floor plan and the style of the home, which obviously can vary dramatically, particularly for custom built houses. We should be comparing properties to like properties, and sometimes the outside may look the same, but the inside may be very different. So ramblers should be compared to ramblers, and 2-story to 2-story. How many times have we seen a rambler compared to comparables that are all 2 stories? It makes it very difficult to come up with an accurate CMA. So let's just make sure we have the plan or style of the home the same for comparables. Any comments or thoughts on that slide? Okay, let's look at the age of the property, of course, really important. The MLS system will allow the comparables to go back 5 years in age and forward 5 years. So that's kind of how that works. So if the subject is built in 2000, then the comparables can be from 1995 to 2005. That's how the MLS system works. Any comments or thoughts on that? Okay, let's move to number of bedrooms and baths. Very, very important. Make sure that we do them as close to the subject possible. And the benefit on the MLS guide is we can make these adjustments. And if we've got a house that's more or less exactly the same, but maybe it's got an extra half bath or it's got an extra small bedroom, then the adjustments in that MLS Pro will make the difference for us, which is quite good. Any questions on that? Okay, let's look at the garage side. Sorry, the garage size. I sometimes get that wrong, you know. It's my English accent. But there we go. Incidentally, by the way, the reason the English say garage is because if you split the word up, right, and you say, how do you spell G-A? You go, ga. And if you said, how do you spell R-A-G? You say rage. See, garage, have you got that? Just thought I'd share that with you, garage. But over here, the wonderful US, they say garage. And so what they've done, they've put an extra R between the A and the G. See, garage. Can you see that? Just a bit of education for you there, folks. But it is a garage in the UK and it's a garage over here. But either way, the size is really important. Let's look at it. So this is something we need to be aware of, and sometimes we might get distracted on this. But so even though we might see there's like, we might think that's a 3-car garage, you know, double and a single. But it might not be so. That single may be a double. It may go, you may get 2 cars in there, one behind the other. So that become a 4-car garage rather than 3 cars. So just be aware how many cars you can fit in there. That's the key. Okay. If you have a 3-car garage door and one side has an extra deep space, and you could take 2 cars, make it a 4-car garage. So just be careful on that one. And sometimes you've got to measure it. If you've got an extended single garage, you may have to just check the measurement because it has to take 2 standard cars. So some of these extended garages just take the very long trucks, you know, that are like, whatever they are, 22-foot long or 24-foot long. But they might not get 2 cars in there. It's got to get 2 reasonable cars. I'm not talking about those little tiny dinky cars. I'm talking about a normal size car for it to be called a 4-car garage. So size of the garage is really important, and that does add value to your property. Let's talk about amenities. You know, different comparables will reflect different amenities or features. And so we need to try and emulate those if we can. You know, if there's a fire pit out there, or there's flagstone pathway or rockery or feature, water feature, whatever it may be. This is a broad category for comparing properties, everything from lofts to finished basements, soaker tubs to swimming pools, fireplaces to patios, and security systems to solar panels. You're not going to necessarily see a place on the MLS and say, does it have solar panels? Because that's probably not going to be there. But if you are comparing a CMA, you can sort of estimate roughly what you think that might be compared to other properties that might have the same, that are sold at a similar price. And often these amenities will add feature value to the property, not always necessarily monetary value, okay, even though they do carry some monetary value. Finding a comparable that exactly matches the subject in terms of amenities is unlikely. The goal is to identify comparables that are as similar as possible. Okay, any thoughts or comments on that slide? Okay, let's move on to another little area on this. Some amenities are sensitive to changing demands and tastes, and their value, typical value, varies from market to market. When you consider the importance of an amenity in price of the property, you must think about whether it is of value today. So something might be of value 10 years ago, and today it's not anymore. And so just consider that. So there's a question I pose out there. Do you think an appraiser will consider as added value? Yes, he probably will. And he'll have a little tool to do that. And it will depend on the area and the property, but he does have a tool that can add some extra value. He can even add a tool that's if you've got a property that's got a really good scenic view, or even close to good walks or whatever, he can add that in there. We actually can't add that very well because we don't have that in our tools, but he does. Improvements are important. So comparables, improvements should match the subjects as closely as possible. Sometimes it can be in, improved kitchen or basement or deck or some sort of style outside in the yard. Improvements can range from required maintenance to style updates to additions. Each home improvement may need to be evaluated for cost. Remember that often only about 50% of the cost to value is increased unless it is adding to total square footage. So be cautious and use common sense on this. Unless we're actually increasing the square footage of a home, often the value is about half of what it's costing to build. Ask an appraiser for their opinion of how much whatever's been done might bring value to that property. And if you've got an appraiser that you know personally, they're often happy to take a call and give you some advice on that. Any comments on that slide? Okay, so that's improvements. And then we'll go to potential negatives. So just have a think about this, because this is part of the game too. So busy streets or near business or industrial districts, maybe irrigation canal or road or rail tracks, power lines can be another one, could be a disadvantage. Maybe in a rundown neighborhood, or a stop sign, or a fire hydrant, or mailboxes, or school bus pickups, drop-offs, parks, walkways. Just think about those, because these can have a bit of a negative platform. It's got a home here, it's got a little park just outside there, which is for the community. Now, it also could be a positive experience. If you've got a family that's moving in, it's a big house on a small lot, and it's right next to a little park, and they've got some kiddies there, then we think, oh, this is a positive for me. And we quite like this house and we'll buy it. However, if you've got a senior couple who's buying the home, who's thinking, I don't want to listen to kids on the little park, you know, all days, straight out of school and weekends, they may see that as a negative. So it's not always a negative. Some people may say a stop sign is a good thing because the traffic is slowing down by my house. So just be conscious of those other pieces of the puzzle that may come into a comparable, and it can make a difference depending on who your buyer is. Any questions or comments on that slide? Okay. How many comparables should you identify for your CMA research? Well, the answer is a range. At least 3 or as many as needed to find that will be appropriate for that subject you're working with. Ideally, in your report, you want to have at least 3 up to 6 that are comparable, and hopefully state that these comparables should be sold. That's what you're aiming for, sold if possible. Certainly in this market, you're probably going to get those sold comparables. Types of comparables needed. Active listings, of course, can also be included in a separate section of your CMA to show the seller the supply and demand of competing properties. This will allow the seller to recognize what they're up against when competing for buyers' dollars in the price range. So active listings, of course, is what we're working with. Here comes our next keyword. Number 3, keyword. Okay. Comparables, C-O-M-P-A-R-A-B-L-E-S. So comparables, shouting out you there. It's the 3rd keyword as we get into the last furlong on this class. Comparables will be your 3rd keyword. I think we've had all C's today on the keywords. So comparables is the 3rd one. So now let's have a little look at these different types of houses. So we've got the single family home. We've got the condo, we've got the duplex, the apartments, we've got the twin homes, we've got the townhouse, we've got the mobile homes, we've got recreational. So we've got a few different types of homes there. And it's important when we're comparing like for like. So we don't want to be comparing a twin home to a family home or to a duplex or an apartment. We're trying to get like for like. So let's have a look at these different types of homes and see what they are. So we'll start off with a single family home, which most of us are selling these days. It's an independent residential structure that sits on its own land. Okay, that's what a single family home is. And there it is. Could be a rambler, could be a two-story. Okay, both single family homes. All right. It's designed to be a single dwelling unit. That's what they call it. Okay. And typically the owner owns the structure and the land. So both is owned in the contract. As front and back yards, I can also never understand why you call it a yard over here. In England, we just call it a garden. Did you know that? A front garden and a back garden. Over here, we call it the yard. In England, the yard is like, it's the commercial yard where you put all the lorries and the semis and the trucks. Or you send the horses to the knacker's yard. That's the knacker's yard. So I came over here, we found out it's the front yard and the backyard. I still struggle with that because I think it's my front garden, my back garden. Mind you, I might remind you that when the Lord created Adam and Eve, he put them in the Garden of Eden. He didn't put them in the Yard of Eden. So I'm not sure where you guys got the yard from, but I'm okay with that. I'm an American citizen, by the way, so I've sort of got into it. When I talk to people about what's on the front yard and the front and the backyard, I have to be careful that I don't say what's in the back garden because they think the whole garden is vegetables. Have you noticed that? Anyway, so there we are. Single family home usually has a front yard and a backyard. And has at least one garage on the property, okay? That's the single family home, guys. Let's look at the condo, short for condominium.
It's, you know, it is good.
Yes.
It is good to know what some of your pet peeves are, Stephen.
I've got over them. When I first moved over here, Ronnie, I really struggled working with the word garage. It just didn't sound right. It sounded like someone was out on a foreign language, but I'm okay with it.
He would tell me off when I would say garage. He'd say it's garage. And I said, no, people don't understand us. We have to speak American.
I'd say to people, let's go look at the garage.
Accent, but no, yeah. It's just, there's so many words. Like if I say flip your hood, you'd have no idea what I was talking about on your car. No, sorry. If I said flip your bonnet, hood is what you guys call it, but here the hood is the bonnet and the trunk is the boot. So, you know, we have to speak American English, otherwise people don't understand what we're saying.
You say open up the boot. People say, what am I opening the boot for? Well, the boot is the trunk in the car, you see. So I learned over very, very quickly with clients. Let me show you the garage. They go, well, the garage, what's that? Oh, sorry, the garage. You see what I mean? That's how it works. But it's all good. So this condo, we don't tend to have those in England either. Typically a large property complex divided into individual units and sold. So that's kind of what it is. Let's see if we can figure out what else it is. Could be smaller, multi-level home attached to others, defined by ownership. So you only own the airspace within the walls of the dwelling. Everything else is jointly owned with the other condo owners, all right? Often comes with many shared amenities and common spaces. Usually includes a non-exclusive interest in certain community property controlled by a condominium management company. Generally, requirement of paying an HOA for the property upkeep. So that's basically what your condo is, all right? Just remember, you're basically owning the airspace and you've got common places. You don't really own the land, okay? Let's go on to the next one, duplex. I found this one hard to understand. So let's go through that. Duplex is a residence with 2 living units, okay? So that's interesting. Usually have one owner, but may be occupied by 2 households. Owners can live in one unit and rent out the other, or rent both units or occupy both units. Sometimes owners will, you know, have another member of the family in one of the other units. The 2 units always share a common wall, but the floor plan can vary. Can be defined as either a single family attached or, that should be, single family detached dwelling unit. Single family attached dwelling units are duplex without a subdividing property line between the two units. So that's the definition of a duplex. And you'll often find on the MLS, sometimes they get these duplexes muddled up with other properties. So that's what a duplex is. Let's go to the next one, which is apartments, a bit easier to understand. Can be applied to any residential unit inside a building, including a house, townhouse, large complex residential building, high-rise buildings, and even condominiums where the owners sublet their units. All right. In general terms, apartments are rented, usually not owned, which you can own them, but generally speaking, they are rented. So that's what an apartment is. Let's move on to the twin homes. In England, we would call this a semi-detached, by the way. We won't call it a twin home because it's semi-detached. It's detached on each end, joined in the middle. But there'd be two different units in England. But over here, called twin homes. So twin homes in one structure. Usually multi-floor homes that share one or two walls with adjacent properties, but have their own entrances, so they're completely different. They could mirror, maybe they don't mirror. And the owner owns their portion of the house and the lot beneath. So they own the ground beneath the portion of their house. So they can do whatever they want to their yard or garden, as they say. Unless constrained by the community requirements, you can paint the structure and design the yard as you wish. So that's a twin home. Townhouse, and we do have these in England. A little bit different. Townhouses all usually look the same, just they've got a whole bank, usually 6 or 9 or 12s. But here we've got the townhouse. You own the structure and the property beneath it, usually arranged in a row of identical houses that share walls on either side, except the end units. Usually the end units will sell for a little bit more. Pay for HOA to cover the cost of general maintenance, and generally complete freedom to control the interior of the home, but typically need arrangement from other owners or the community if you want to change something on the outside of the building, external structure of the building. It's actually a townhouse. Then we've got your mobile home, and hopefully it looks like the one above. The one below looks like it's a bit rough actually, but we do see those. Also known as a park home or a home trailer, or trailer home, or static caravan, or an RV, or residential caravan, or motorhome. This is your mobile home. Could be built in a factory usually, transported to a permanent or temporary site. Unless you own the land, you would rent the land to house your mobile home. You can rent your mobile home and land to a tenant. So if you own the land and you own the home, you can rent it both to a tenant. That's what is called a mobile home. Okay, recreation. Look at that, huh? Recreational land is property that is primarily used for recreation, having fun, enjoyment, pleasure. Usually not land that is also being used for commercial timberland. Okay, it's usually solely for recreation. Could be an adventure park or land that's used for walking or biking or riding or whatever it may be. But that's recreational land. Has anybody here sold any recreational land? No, I haven't either. Okay, so there are all the types. We've just gone through this whole CMA lesson today. Let's see if we can review what we've gone through. Oh, before I do that, did anybody have any questions about the types of buildings we looked at there? Okay. I'm probably the only person that learned anything on those because they're a bit different to England, but it's all good. This is what we discussed today. We first of all looked at building the CMA with the UtahRealEstate.com website. And then we got the cloud option, and if you may want to check with your brokerage to see whether or not they have that cloud CMA available at no cost, because if it is, it's probably good to use. We talked about the summary of Article 11.1, and then we talked about the purpose of the CMA and who needs a CMA. We talked about the advantages for buyers and sellers using CMAs, fundamental principles of comparables, and the characteristics of comparables. Went through the size and the age and all those sort of things. Number of comparables needed, usually looking, around 3 to 6 if you can get those. And then we talk about the different types of houses. Has anybody got any comments or questions on any of those areas that we've reviewed today? Hopefully you found some of those reasonably interesting. I always enjoy being with you today. If you've got any questions or comments, now the time to throw them out. Other than that, I shall certainly thank you for being with us today and being involved and sharing your stories and thoughts. If you have any good suggestions to make these classes better, please email me. I will get those credit hours banked for you by tomorrow. You wait a couple of days to make sure they show up on the system. And with that said, Leslie Ann, do you want to tidy this little class up? And then we'll have a few minutes early finished.
Do you all see the link that I shared at the beginning of the class in the chat? If you didn't, I can share it again. The chat's not long, so. And
then what are our 2 classes next week, Leslie Ann? Do you have those available? We can share them.
Next week there is hang about. Okay, so on Tuesday it's
That's the
how
10
to,
a.m. one.
yeah, 10 to 12, 11th of May, how to prepare and hold a successful open house. And then on Wednesday, the 12th, it is seller's discovery presentation, and that's 1 to 3. Okay.
So good couple of classes next week. If you've not done those, they are both CE classes, so you will get credit for CE on those. With that said, thank you for being with us today. Have a super day. Enjoy the good weather. Apparently tomorrow it's going to get to 81 here in Logan, so we're looking forward to that. I hope you're getting some sunshine as well.
Yeah, but don't get too excited, because then it goes down to 59 a couple of days later.
We don't want to.
Oh, weather. We're still in May, right? I need to remember that. And sometimes we get snow in May. I shouldn't say that. I've cursed it. Oh dear.
Thank you, Rami, Jenny, and Mike. Appreciate you being with us.
Thank you.
Mike.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jenny. Thanks, Leslie Ann.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We made you laugh, Rami.
Yeah, you did. You did.
It's a nice someone laugh.
Oh gosh.
I've got a lot of English stories I can make you laugh with, Rami.
I know. And I'm looking forward to hearing them.
Really good. I might slip some more in next time we meet.
Yeah.
I've heard them too many times.
Bye, guys.
Take care. Bye.